In this lesson titled Linking Workbooks and Worksheets with Formulas, we're going to need to open up two files that are located in our Lesson 9 folder. So you'll need to browse to your Excel Essentials Class Files folder and then find Lesson 09. We're going to open that up, and we want these first two Excel workbooks called Global Sales and Multiple Worksheets. So I'm going to click on one and shift click the other one to select them both, and then I'll click Open. And both of these workbooks open. We're going to start on this workbook called Multiple Worksheets, where I'm going to illustrate how to link several different worksheets together using formulas. Now I want to make it clear that we do have two workbooks open right now, and in order to see that you'll need to go to your View tab and then to Switch Windows. And if you'll just click on that, you'll see that I have both of these workbooks open, and the check mark is showing us the one we're currently in, Multiple Worksheets. That's where we want to be. Down below we see we have several worksheets: Asia, Africa, EU, USA, and World Totals. We're currently in World Totals, and you can tell that because this worksheet tab is slightly faded. If I click away from it, you'll see that it's dark blue, but when I click on it, it's a very light color. So we're currently in here, and what we want to do is come up with the totals for retail, wholesale, and internet from our different outlets. And here's our different outlets. We have Asia, and we have some totals for retail and wholesale and internet, and then the grand totals. And we see that that is true for all of these: Africa, EU, and USA. You probably noticed that all of these worksheets are laid out identically. The only thing that is different is the different numbers. This can be very useful when you need to when you create formulas that link together different worksheets. Also, if you need to change all of the worksheets in a particular way, it's very useful that they are all laid out the same. So let's go back to our world totals. And here we want the retail total from all of those regions. So just like previously when we worked with formulas, the same thing applies here, only our references or our addresses will come from different worksheets. So let me illustrate. I'm just going to click here in D5 where we're looking for the total for retail, and I'm going to type equals sum. Now I can double click on sum, or I can hit tab to accept this, and it will put in the parentheses for us. And we already know that all functions and all formulas have a parentheses where we put in the numbers or the references. So to get my references, I'm going to just come down to the very bottom here and click on Asia and say what I want is retail total. So here's retail, and total is down here, and it's this 1500. And what I want is the total for retail, so I'm in Asia, retail, and the total is not here yet. So why don't we quickly put that in? I'm just going to no. I have to start all over actually. So we're here in the Asia tab. I see my products, and I see retail and total, and this is the number I want, retail total. So I simply click on it. So I'm here in my Asia tab, and I see products, retail, and here is our total. So I simply click on it, and I can see up above in my formula bar it now says equals sum Asia, and when I click on this reference I get D10, and sure enough that is the reference I want, D10, that's my total. Now I can go to the next tab. Now I can click plus on that formula because I'm going to add the next tab, Africa, and get my total. Here it is, grand total, plus D10 on Africa, plus up in my formula bar, EU, get this grand total, plus USA. Now I have all the ones I want, and you can see in the formula bar that it actually shows me the name of each of these sheet tabs. That makes it very handy, plus the reference, and all of them say D10. Now if I hit enter at any time, it ends the equation, takes me back to the original place I started, I click to get this last total, and I see D10 up here after USA. Now all I have to do is click enter, and that will end my formula and return me back to my original tab that I started in. So that's how you end the formula like you normally would with an enter. Only you don't have to click on the World Totals tab to go back there. It automatically takes you back where you started. If I click on my formula, I can see up here Asia D10 plus Africa D10 plus EU D10 plus USA D10. So that's a very useful way to simply add up some different numbers. But did you notice they're all in D10? And that might give you a clue for a way that we can do this a lot more efficiently. Let's start over again. I'm just going to click here and hit delete. What if this time we said equals sum? I'm going to double click to accept. Now I'm going to come down to my tabs down here. I'm going to click on Asia, but now I'm going to shift click all the way over to USA. So all of these are now selected, Asia, Africa, EU, and USA. And you can see that they're all highlighted, showing they're selected. Now World Totals is also highlighted. That's because that's the tab we started on, and in a way it's still selected because we started our formula in that tab. Well, with all three of these selected, all three of these regions, I'm currently in the Asia tab. All I have to do is come over here and click here on D10 to get that total. And now look up in your formula bar. Equals sum Asia through USA D10. And all I have to do is hit enter to accept. And there's my total. I was able to do that much faster. Now you're probably thinking, well, do I need to do the same thing for each one of these? Well, in a way we do, because if I would just simply to use my autofill handle where I get my thin plus and I grab my autofill handle and I drag that down, you can see that it's not quite working for us. The reason is because these references are not in the same place. I'm going to hit delete to delete those. You can see here that D10 is where we got the retail totals. If I come back over here to Asia, we'll see that the wholesale totals all the way down here is E10 and then F10 and then G10. So it comes across this way. It's not coming down, it's coming across. So the 10 is still the row, but it's changing from E and F to be the different columns. So let's go back to our formula here. And if I wanted to copy that down, I still could, but the formula is wrong. I could just go into this formula here and say, oh, it's not D11. I don't want to go down. I want to go across. I want to stay in E, but I want that to be 10, E10, and then hit enter. And we get the right total there. And I can do the same thing here. And instead of E, this could be F and 10. So we're getting the correct totals that way by changing it. I didn't have to go back and do that whole thing again. I just had to kind of know where they were relative to each other. Grand total, that's no problem. I can just click right here and do an auto sum. I'm in my home tab, so I can come up here to the top right and click auto sum. It says, is this the sum you want? Yes, it is. I hit enter to accept. And what about over here? We want to know the percentage totals. Well, percentage totals is pretty straightforward. We just want to know equals this number divided by the total down here. So I click here and say OK. And so that gives us the total percentage. I'll just say here, if we want to copy this down, we want to keep that percentage from, if we want to copy this down with autofill, we don't want this grand total number to change. You can see here it's part of the formula. If I copy this down, this will also copy down relative. So we want this number to always stay, and these can change. So this D8 right here, we want it to be permanent, so I'm going to hit F4. And it puts the dollar signs there for us. Now I can hit enter to accept. And now I'm just going to copy this down. And we get our other percentages. So we can see it's relatively easy to create a formula that will pull from the other worksheets. And we can also highlight or group a lot of worksheets together, and then we can put in. It's also easy to group worksheets so that when you grab a formula from one of them, so that when you grab an address from one of them, it grabs it from all of them. Finally, I want to briefly discuss this idea about dependencies for these formulas, because as you see, this formula is pulling it from other worksheets, and it's kind of nice to know what's happening in your worksheet. If we go to Formulas tab, and over here in Formula Auditing, you'll see trace precedence and trace dependence. So with one of these highlighted currently, let's hit trace precedence. And we get a little box and an arrow, which means this is being pulled from somewhere else in your workbook. And that's really all it tells you. You have to actually look up in the formula to see more. Now, any of these I'm curious about, I can hit click. Now, any of these I'm curious about, I can simply select it and then hit trace precedence, and you'll get arrows for those. Now, interestingly, I cannot select, a lot of cells and then just hit this to get all of them. It will only do one at a time. And to get rid of them, I can highlight them and click on Remove Arrows. Let's try that again. If you select all of them and try Trace Precedence, you just get one of them. It can only take on one at a time. There we go. And then we can remove again. So that might be useful for you. One other way that might be even more useful is just simply to search for code that shows us where there is a precedence, because you might not know where in your document you even need to click and then click on trace precedence. You might just not know, and you don't want to have to click on all of them and then read what it says up in the formula bar. So to do that, we can go back to our Home tab and go to Find. And on the Find dialog box, I'm going to put in exclamation mark. Because exclamation mark is what is put after the name of all tabs. So we see up here Asia through USA, exclamation mark F10. So it's looking for all of those. So I'm going to say Find All. I'll move this up here and open this down, and we see it found 3 of them. And if I click on any of these, it's actually a link that'll take you there. So if you had a large worksheet with lots of precedents, then you could quickly find them this way. I'm going to close this. And now let's go to Home. And now let's go to View and switch windows. And here you can see we have two windows open, and we want to go to Global Sales. Now that we're in a different workbook, I want to talk about how you can pull data from a different workbook Since we have two workbooks open, we can talk about how to collect data from one workbook and show it in a different workbook. Earlier we talked about how to take data from references in different worksheets, and now the same thing applies, but they're from different workbooks. We'll be switching back and forth between the two, and it might be useful to add the Switch Windows command to your Quick Access toolbar. To do that, you just simply right-click on Switch Windows, and your first option is Add to Quick Access Toolbar. And now you'll see it right up here. So this might come in handy, especially if we start moving around into different tabs, so we don't always have Switch Windows available to us. So just like before, we're going to make a very simple function. We're going to use sum. So we just say equals SU. I see sum in my list. I double-click. I get my parentheses so I know I'm ready to enter some data. And instead of clicking on a reference here or on a different tab, I'm going to go to Switch Windows, go to our multiple worksheets, and I'll start here in the Asia tab. And what did I need? I needed the totals for large syringe. So here's my total right here. I just click it and it's G5, and I see right here that I'm in the Asia tab, G5, and something new to us, we're also getting the complete path for the multiple worksheets XLS document right there. So now I have this G5. Now I just need to select the cell reference I want, which is going to be large syringe totals, large syringe and large syringe, and the total right here. But before I click that total, let's think for a minute here. I actually want to add up the totals from all of my distribution areas. So I'm going to make sure Asia is selected here and shift to USA. So all three of these are selected. So all four of these are selected. And now I can get that reference. And if we look up in the formula bar, you can see things look a little more complicated. What are we adding up? Well, it's Lesson 09, multiple worksheets. And then the Asia through USA tab and G5 on all of those worksheet tabs. All I have to do now is just simply hit enter. And there's the large syringe totals from each of those. If I click here, I can see, sure enough, there's the complete path, and it includes Asia through USA and G5 from each one of those. Well, because on all the other worksheets in the other workbook are all in the same relative area and they're in the same order, large, small, needle pack, cotton balls, first aid kits, I can just simply use my autofill handle and drag that down. But surprisingly, I get the same total in each one of these. If we look back up here, we'll see we have an absolute reference of G5. It's not letting me get a relative reference. Now, G is okay, that's our column, but we do want each row to change as we go down. So I'm going to come back on our formula and get rid of the absolute symbol for 5. so that it can change. It won't be absolute anymore. And hit enter. So that's still the same, but now I can drag this down, and now it works. So you might need to check your formulas, make sure that you have the right kind of absolute and the right kind of relative reference to make your formula work. So pretty straightforward once you kind of understand how Excel is working and what shortcuts are available to you. So you might want to play around with this a little bit. Now, it's typically recommended that you do not pull your data from different workbooks, because workbooks get renamed, they get deleted, and they get moved, and that can really cause a problem. If you have complete control over those workbooks, if you're keeping them safe and you can remember to not move them to another location or to rename them, you'll be okay. But otherwise, this works best if you just are using relative references from different worksheets inside of the same workbook.